What is up, everybody? Welcome back to this episode of Home Built Workshop. Today, I'm gonna build this rack to store some grinding accessories and also my grinding belts. Now that I've got the belt grinder done and completely usable, one thing you gotta have on hand for a belt grinder, that's right, belts. And I bought a bunch. I got this package in the mail, whole bunch of 2x72 sanding belts. I bought all kinds of grits and a lot of different styles. I've said it before, there's so many different belt options for a belt grinder. I think that is what makes it so versatile. That's one of the reasons that I wanted to build a belt grinder. But in this box, I've got aluminum oxide belts, I've got silicon carbide belts, I've got some ceramic super coarse belts. Now this video is not going to be about these belts. I do want to talk more about them in the future, but I've just not had a chance to really experiment with all these different grits and different kinds. Plus, there's still a lot more out there that I don't even have yet. But first, I gotta have somewhere to store these. I need something that's easily accessible and that I can sort out the different grits and different materials so that I can find them easily when it comes time to use them. So I looked around the shop. I got some pine pallet wood, I've got some scraps of plywood, and I've got a whole bunch of shaker pegs. I'm going to put together a really simple, easy to construct shaker peg style coat rack. At least we'll call it a coat rack. I'm not putting coats on it, but it could be a coat rack, a hat rack, whatever kind of rack, belt rack, whatever it is you need to hang up, you can call it that. Really easy to build, and I'm going to also try to show a couple of different ways to make the different cuts and make the pieces for this project, because not everybody's got a table saw or maybe not a drill press or something like that. So one thing I want to do throughout the rest of this video while we're constructing this shelf is I want to show some alternate methods that you could use if maybe you don't have a whole bunch of tools, maybe you've only got a handful of power tools or maybe even no power tools. We'll look at that too. So let's jump right in, get this thing built. I'm going to start off with this scrap of plywood. I'll start off by just taking a few measurements of this scrap so that I can cut all the corresponding pieces to fit. I'm going to divide this piece of plywood into two sections. I'm going to have a divider going down the center, and I'm going to have 2 rows of shaker pegs. That way I can store my grinding discs on one section and the belts can hang down off the bottom. First, I'm going to lay out a center line down the center of this piece of wood. Then I'll just draw a straight line down the center of each of those 2 sections. This will be where I'll drill the holes for the shaker pegs. Now I just need to figure out exactly where I need to place the shaker pegs. So I've just grabbed a bunch of grinding discs and I'm just going to kind of see how they fit on there, measure out the distance, mark the holes. Since the pegs that'll hold the belts are going to be in the same spot, I'm just going to transfer my marks using a speed square. To make sure you're lined up exactly, you can take the point of your pencil and put it on your pencil mark, slide the speed square up against your pencil, and then when you make your mark, you know that your pencil is exactly in the same spot in relation to the speed square. Now that we have all the holes marked out for the shaker pegs, we need to drill those holes. Now, the obvious choice for me would be to take this straight to the drill press, boom, 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 done, holes drilled, and we move on. But what if you don't have a drill press? Well, there's a lot of different ways you can still drill the holes and get the same thing accomplished. One way would be the most old school way I can think of, with an old school brace and bit. I don't have an auger bit, but I do have a Forstner bit stuck in this brace. This belonged to my grandpa. Don't know how old it is, but it's drilled. As I'm drilling, I'm feeling underneath the piece. I want to stop before the bit blows all the way through and really chips out the back side of this plywood. As soon as I feel the point of the bit poking through, I'm going to stop. I'll flip the board over and drill from the other side. This will keep both sides from splintering out. Old school brace works really good. Holes nice and clean, not splintered, but takes a little bit of time. So what's another option? Cordless drill or a corded drill. We'll just take the same Forstner bit, put it in the cordless drill, and drill our holes that way. Much faster. Actually, I think it's fast enough the way it is. I'm not even going to go to the drill press right now. I'm going to drill them all with this. There's our Swiss cheese piece of plywood. Not a whole lot of splintering on the back, just a couple little places. Not even big enough to worry about. The lip on the shaker peg will definitely cover that up. Now I used a Forstner bit to drill these holes, but if you don't have Forstner bits, it's absolutely not necessary that you use a Forstner bit. You could use a spade bit in the right size, and that'll give you excellent results as well. Another option would be to just use a regular old twist bit. It'll put a hole in the wood and it'll work for what you need. It may not give you the cleanest results when you're drilling, so it wouldn't be my first choice, but if that's what you have, use it. Now before I go any further, I'm just gonna sand down this piece of plywood with some 220. This is only because it's gonna be the easiest to sand right now. Once I go any farther, it's gonna be really difficult to sand. Next, I'm going to use a flush cutting saw and trim off the back of these pegs. I've had good results in the past just using a plain old hacksaw blade. It takes just a little bit longer. The results are almost identical to the flush cutting saw. Now I'll start cutting down the pieces that'll make up the top and the sides of this shelf. Don't have a table saw? Not a problem. Use a circular saw and a speed square to get a nice square cut. And if you don't have a circular saw, you can always just use a hand saw. And lastly, I'm going to rip a little bit of material off the piece that'll make up the top. I'm using my table saw, but this is a cut that you can easily do with a circular saw and a straight edge. Now using some double-sided tape, I'm going to stick the two side pieces together. And I'll just sketch a little curve on there that I kind of like. And I'm going to cut that out on my bandsaw. An alternative would be to use a coping saw, but unfortunately I can't demonstrate that because my coping saw just recently broke and I haven't had a chance to replace it. Now I'll just sand the freshly cut edge nice and smooth. You could use about any method of sanding, but one method that everybody has the tools for is, of course, hand sanding. And I'll cut down the board that'll make up the center shelf. Now I can go ahead and get this thing glued up. Really simple, there's no fancy joinery, everything is butt joints. We're going to reinforce them later on with dowels. It's also just to show you that you don't need to do fancy joinery to build a functional piece. Butt joints work out pretty well, especially if you reinforce them with either a spline or dowels or even like a biscuit or something like that. They'll work just fine. So now I've got the shelf out of the clamp, the glue is all dry. The glue up was a little bit tricky. I think it would have been a little bit easier had I used some pin nails or some finish nails and actually just tacked all these pieces into place rather than trying to clamp them up, which was a little bit iffy, but it worked out okay. but I realized I made just a small mistake that I need to recover from. When I cut the side pieces, I intended to make these a little bit longer so that I could glue in a strip of wood to actually wrap out all of the plywood, and I actually cut them at the same width as the plywood. So now if I glue a piece on there, it's not going to match up with this overhang that's right here. So I need to fix that. Now to figure out exactly how we're going to fix that. Got an idea. Next, I need to reinforce the joints with some dowels. Now I'll just take a piece of sandpaper and lightly sand off the burrs from the edge of that dowel. Then I'll just take some wood glue, dab a little bit on the dowel, and drive them suckers into the hole. Now I can trim the dowels off using a flush cutting saw. A hacksaw blade works pretty well too. Now that I have all the sanding completed, it's time to move on to the finish. Now I kind of was going back and forth as to what kind of finish I was going to use. I thought about using like a stain, a dark stain, that might kind of bring the different types of wood together a little bit. I did a test piece on the same piece of wood, and I'm just not really a fan of it. So I think I'm going to embrace the palette wood and just go with a clear. I'm just going to use a couple of coats of spray lacquer and seal everything up. After screwing this shelf to the wall, now I've got a cool place for my grinding belts and also discs for the angle grinder. I can keep everything sorted out and organized. Easily accessible. The coolest part though, now I can get this pile of grinding belts out of the box onto the shelf where I can easily access them and keep them sorted. I've got an assortment here of many different kinds of belts. I've got some ceramic belts ranging from 40 to 120 grit. I've got some aluminum oxide belts in 220 and 400. I've got some silicon carbide belts going from 400, I believe, up to 800. I've got a cork polishing belt and also a surface conditioning belt, which is basically a Scotch-Brite belt. Now they're easily accessible, sorted out, where I can get to them super fast and tell exactly what I have and not have to dig through a box where they get all twisted up and tangled up and crushed or damaged. So I hope you guys enjoyed this project. I know it's something that I've been looking forward to since I got this box of belts in the mail, wanting to get everything organized so that I can see what I have and access them very quickly. I also want to reiterate the fact that you can build some cool stuff. You don't need a whole bunch of fancy tools, and I hope that maybe this helps inspire you or give you at least a couple of ideas of other ways to do some things so you can build cool stuff. Even though there's no fancy joinery in this, it's just glued together butt joints and reinforced with dowels, I have absolute confidence that this thing is not going to fall apart. It's going to hold up for quite a while, and I'll get plenty of use out of it. Now, there may be some extreme applications where you wouldn't want to do something like this, but for this application, it's going to be just fine. If you guys enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Also, don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel so that you don't miss any episodes. Also, don't forget to click the little bell icon down below where you get notifications from YouTube every time I post a video. Currently, you don't always get a notification, and it doesn't always pop up in your feed when there's a new video. So in order to not miss anything, click the bell. And one last thing, don't forget I have a second YouTube channel called Inside Home Built Workshop where I post updates of what's going on in and around the shop. I'll put a link to it down below in the description. You can also head over to my website, homebuiltworkshop.com. Check it out. We got stickers available and soon to be t-shirts. So thanks a lot for watching, everyone. Take care, and we'll see you next time. I'm gonna fall on my head. You guys ready for some good behind the scenes stuff? Because I'm about to fall.